are in that work, and then we'll have a discussion, a second discussion about where we see our future. So with that framework in mind, we want to think about um, that sort of story mapping that we started this morning, and where are we within that journey as it pertains to lands programs. So lands programs focus primarily on waste and hazardous waste prevention. So all of those things that that communities are facing with regards to materials, the management of those materials, and life of those materials. So I have a huge panel today, including two folks who are on the screen um, that are calling in from Alaska. So I'm just excited to have this big panel. We have about an hour and a half, hour and 25-minute session. And hopefully we'll get some really rich discussions as we go through. So starting off, I am going to introduce our first panelist and have her talk a little bit about her program, and then we will move down the line until we can wrap it up. When we get to the discussion point, the panelists will actually join you at tables. So this is going to hopefully mean that we have even more rich discussions, and our panelists can learn from you about your experiences in your community. We wanted very much for this to be a sharing of information in both ways. So when we talked about sort of communicating through challenges yesterday, this is an opportunity to practice that, obviously. So thank you all. I'm going to introduce Kayla Kraus, who is the Tribal Solid Waste Program Lead, and I will give her the floor to talk a little bit about her program.
Okay, thank you, Christy. And my understanding is that we're each going to do about 3 to 5 minutes. So this is going to be kind of the lightning round of each of us talking about our programs, the resources from our programs, and technical assistance. So thank you for being our audience today. As Christy said, my name is Kayla Kraus. I lead Region 10's Tribal Solid and Hazardous Waste Program. So that is serving all 4 of the Region 10 states. But I'm based in the Seattle office, but I am lucky enough to get to travel to Alaska at least a couple times a year. I saw some of you guys up at Camp just about a month ago. So it's really great to see all of you from Alaska here today. It's fun to see Alaskans down here, but I usually see you up there. So our program, it is focused on solid and hazardous waste. So in simple terms, that's your garbage, your recycling, composting, and backhauling. So it does not include sewage or sewage lagoons. We do sometimes get questions about that, but that is not under our program. So just a quick heads up about that. So the things I just wanted to share about today are a couple of our grant programs that you may or may not be aware of. One is kind of our big new funding under the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that's the solid waste infrastructure for recycling grants. We call those SWIFR. If you've ever seen one of my PowerPoint presentations, it has a little picture of those Swiffer mops on it to try and help you remember that acronym and find our resources online. And within that program, there was a separate set aside for tribes and tribal consortia to compete under. It was a competitive program. And with all the Swiffer programs, because there was also Swiffer for states, and also for local governments, so not tribal governments, but your counterparts with the cities, the boroughs, et cetera. And that was authorized for $275 million between FY22 and FY26. That was a lot of money. We've put out one round of funding. Those selections were announced in November, and there were 59 tribes selected nationally. And in Region 10, there were 23 grantees. That is amazing. And within Alaska, 16 grantees from Alaska out of those 59 nationally for $20 million going to tribes in Alaska for work on their solid waste programs. So under this program, we saw everything from continuing to support backhaul efforts. We have several grantees in Southeast Alaska who are going to be working on composting. Several who are working on other recycling initiatives in their communities or building a recycling shed, buying equipment, so trucks, dozers, things that I always hear are really high need for Alaska waste programs. So that was the first round of funding. It is just so amazing that there were that many grantees, but I have been getting a lot of questions about when the next round of funding will be, because I know people have been hearing about this and saying, wow, that sounds like a great opportunity. When is it coming up again? How do I get in on it this time? And at this point, EPA has not announced plans for the next round of funding. But just looking at the math of how much money there was, how much money went out, there is still a big chunk. And so we would anticipate there's going to be at least one more round. Like I said, we don't know the timing. But since we just announced selections in November, we're actually still working with those grantees to get their grants and get started on their projects. So you can kind of get a sense, we're still finishing up this first one. And what I've been telling people is it's never too early to start thinking about your project ideas. If you've been to any of the solid waste trainings that the state has put on, that some of our other partners have put on, that is always the message too, is planning for your solid waste programs, for backhauling, right? It's a seasonal process. These are the times to be thinking about it now, to be starting to put those ideas on paper. And then when these, grants come out, that you're ready to go, that you can put in your application. And we all know that applying for federal grants is not quick or easy. So, as you start having those ideas now, that is my recommendation, is to start working on those plans and thinking about it. The other grant that I just want to briefly mention, because it has been one used a lot in Alaska, is the hazardous waste management grants for tribes. That's usually been kind of an annual program that we have put out, but because of these Swiffer grants, that program is actually going to be on hold for a couple years, just because there's just so much going on. So if you have either been a recipient of those in the past or were thinking about that for the next year, just know that those ones are on pause. That is a message I'm trying to make sure folks know about, so they don't get their hopes set on that one and seeing that announcement, because that was usually in the spring when those would come out. And I think the final thing I want to say, because I know we have many more panelists here, is just a quick mention about the Backhaul Alaska program. So I want to see a show of hands. Who is familiar with Backhaul Alaska? Okay, that's pretty good. I would love to see every hand go up for that one, because again, I know how much backhaul is an important part of the waste management for your communities, getting those hazardous materials out of your landfills, out of your communities to places where they can be processed safely. Backhaul Alaska is hugely funded by EPA, so they are actually kind of by extension, one of our programs, but it's our partners through Coeric and Zender Environmental who are actually implementing that program. So we like seeing that in their hands and them doing that good work. But just a quick mention on that program, they do generally have funds. I think this year they're already kind of maxed out on the communities they're working with for supporting, your full backhaul. I think they already have 46 communities signed up for this year. They've worked with over 80 communities since they started really with the program in 2019. But they do also offer training. So if you have operators who need to get trained to handle those types of materials, you can reach out to Backhaul Alaska. They also can help with vendor selection if you're trying to figure out, man, who who do I find to actually help me with this backhaul? Who are the contractors out there? They can kind of help you find some of those guys. Again, help with training, logistics, and a number of other things. So I believe their website is actually just Google Backhaul Alaska and you will find them right away. They have fantastic stuff and they'll be able to help you out, you know, regardless of what your backhaul needs are for your community. So I really want to suggest that you guys go check that out and be a part of that, as you know, they're really trying to scale up to be a statewide program. So yeah, I think those are the three things that I wanted to mention for Alaska. And I'll look forward to joining your table groups after this. Thank you.
Thanks, Kayla. So after each one of our panelists sort of present their information, they're going to come around with a little one-pager to put on your table so that you can reference that material as we go through. And up next, Cindy Sperry is representing the TSWAN organization. So we have some technical assistance providers up here that are amazing, and folks who have worked with a lot of different tribal solid waste, hazardous waste, and lands projects. So I am really excited that this is not just a bunch of EPA folks up here talking today. And so I'm going to hand the mic to Cindy, who's going to introduce herself. I just want you to think about, you know, Kayla just gave you a whole bunch of information about funding, but also know that the technical assistance is a really big piece of this. So sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's about working with other folks in a cooperative environment and getting those resources. So Cindy.
Thank you, Christy. Morning, everybody. I'm Cindy Spirey, as Christy mentioned. I am the Environmental and Natural Resources Department Director for the Snoqualmie Tribe. I'm also a TSWAN board member, Tribal Solid Waste Advisory Network, we call TSWAN. And our executive director, Bobby Ann Barnowski, runs our programs. She would normally be here giving this information, but she couldn't make it today, so I'm filling in for her. So TSWAN aims to unite tribes in a collaborative effort to address common solid waste and recycling issues on tribal lands. TSWAN is a coalition of Northwest tribes, including Alaska. And we meet tri-annually, and we address environmental, natural resources, public works challenges with a focus on solid waste management, safety, recycling. TSWAN also provides comprehensive training, peer support, technical assistance, and practical guidance to member tribes. And collaboration has always been our strength. By coming together, we build connections that help develop the programs and learn from each other, and form friendships that bring us together. Our meetings are free to all members. We welcome guest tribes. Anyone can come and attend our meeting. We come together and we share, you know, successes, challenges. We have guest speakers and stakeholders and potential partners. And we take time to network between tribes. That's a really important thing that I have always found very helpful being a member of TSWAN. I've been a member for 15 years and been on the board for the last several years. So coming together with other tribes and hearing what other tribes are doing has always been, I felt really valuable and helped me build our program with the Snoqualmie tribe. Our organization is constantly moving forward and evolving to meet tribes' needs. So TSWAN offers a training, at least one training with every meeting, sometimes two meetings, or I'm sorry, two trainings. These trainings are based on what the member tribes are asking for. So we give out a lot of surveys ask what the issues are and ask what trainings tribes really need. So we offer 40-hour HAZWOPER certification on a regular basis. We also offer an 8-hour HAZWOPER recertification, recycling plan writing, asbestos awareness training, safety and documentation, recycling plan writing. We have a whole list of things that we offer. And I do have a pamphlet that I'm going to share with everybody, as Christy mentioned. And we also apply for grant funding to support member tribes. And so by doing that, we're able to support travel. So not only are the meetings free, but we also can support your travel to our meetings. And we have meetings throughout Region 10, Northwest, as I mentioned, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and Alaska. And then the host tribe will often share something about their programs. So we visit different tribes and see what the host tribe is doing, which is also really interesting and valuable to our members. Oh, and Kayla mentioned a Swiffer grant. The Snoqualmie tribe did get, I'm sorry, T-Swan did get a Swiffer grant, which is a really huge project. It's the biggest project that T-Swan has ever undertaken. And this project is working with 4 tribes to create small recycling programs, and the aim is to increase their recycling by 25%. And we also are working with Next Cycle to help solidify our pilot program. And I think that's it. So thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, their meetings are incredible. If you ever get a chance to be a guest at one of their meetings, the people you get to that you get to know, just really great info. And I don't know if any of you have ever met Scott Anderson from Port Huyden. Does anybody know who Scott is? Yeah. So Scott's recycling program was hugely sort of influential in helping folks figure out how to deal with some legacy waste, and then also thinking about how to move how to have a more sustainable solid waste program for a tribe in a very small area out on the Alaska Peninsula. So just know that there are people that are there that are also from Alaska tribes. So just, it's a really great resource. Up next, I have a good friend, Ed Gonzalez from the PPRC organization. P2 is a program that we haven't tapped into in Alaska very much. And currently, our new P2 coordinator for EPA is getting set to start next week. I can't announce who that is yet. I wasn't allowed to. I wanted to, but they start next week. And while we really wanted to talk about P2 pollution prevention as a component of this lands work while we were here, and Ed and his organization, PPRC, have helped a lot of tribes to do P2 work. Something I want to note, the P2 program oftentimes puts out grants. And I think they're usually every other year. They're usually 2-year grants. And that program has a really high match requirement. It's a 50% match. And so in the past, we haven't seen applicants from tribal organizations because that match is a really high bar to think about. And so something to note, we talked about PPGs, performance partnership grants. We talked about Alaska tribes maybe thinking about putting their grants together into a PPG. That opportunity creates a match waiver. So you wouldn't have to put up that 50% match to apply and to receive that grant, which is a huge, huge benefit. And so I just wanted to sort of pitch that as you're listening to what Ed is talking about in terms of pollution prevention opportunities for tribes. Just think in the back of your mind, you know, hey, maybe we have some work in this space that we want to pursue. And that's something to just put in your mind as Ed talks about his work.
Thank you, Christy. My name's Ed Gonzalez. I'm the director of the Pacific Northwest Pollution Prevention Resource Center, or PPRC. We were established in 1991 to work with the state agencies, environmental agencies of Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. That also includes the tribal territories within that region. That was in 1991. 2024, we've expanded our reach to a national scale. So, yeah, so basically we were established to work collaboratively under pollution prevention. And so basically what pollution prevention is the practice of reducing, eliminating, or preventing pollution at its source, right? That's before treatment, recycling, or disposal. And so in the hierarchy of environmental practices, pollution prevention's at the top, because the idea here is let's prevent it from happening in the first place. So there are steps in different industrial sectors that have been developed over the years to address the generation of waste, hazardous waste particularly. And so that's what we focus on. So there are 4 projects in PPRC that I'm interested in sharing with you. One is called fog abatement, fats, oils, and grease, spray efficiency, our EcoBiz green business program here in the state of Oregon, and our pollution prevention zero waste training. First with fog abatement, fats, oils, and grease. So we've been working with tribes in the state of Washington and across the country to work with their casinos and their restaurants. And we try to, well, we do train them, it's an 8-hour training, how to abate or prevent fats, oils, and grease accumulation. So what is this? So when you have commercial kitchens and restaurants and casinos and schools and hospitals, people tend to drain their used oil into their drain, right? And so what happens is over time, it accumulates. And then the water flow gets restricted. And then all of a sudden, it turns into almost as hard as concrete. So you have overflows. And what happens with these overflows is that they have a lot of bacteria. And you can get your communities sick, school children sick. And so what we try to do is prevent that. And it gets so hard, and the process called saponification, it gets so hard that sometimes it takes a jackhammer to break it apart, right? And so what's happening is small communities and large communities and tribes have to spend millions of dollars to replace the sewer system. So we try to prevent that. Right now we have, we've so far since 2018, we've been able to provide training to over 2,400 water systems across the country. So we also have a free database, what do you call it? I'm sorry, guys. I hit 50 and now my eyes are not as good as they used to be. It's a free data software. So it helps the community input all the data that they've done, all the efforts they've done to prevent fog. And then it gives you a tracking mechanism so that it'll tell you more or less where you need to work, how much you've improved over the year. And we have right now up to $2,000 worth of a free data software system. So if any of you are interested, just let me know and we can hook you up with that data software. So there's 2 conditions. One is if your tribe is smaller than 10,000 individuals, and if you represent 80% of what is it called, the state median income. If your tribe, then you're eligible for that free data software. The next one is spray efficiency. So we're going across the country. We provide spray efficiency training to auto body shops, industrial facilities, any application that requires spray efficiency. And so the idea here is to train the sprayers to increase their efficiency in spray efficiency. And we've noticed that over a span of 15 to 20 years, there are auto body shops that have saved over $40,000 in funds and money from just improving their spray efficiency application. And we also include health benefits, like for instance, one common thing about spray efficiency is asthma. So it can exacerbate the spray painter's asthma or can even cause it. And so when we reduce overspray, we've noticed that there's a correlation to that with reduced asthma situations, right? When it comes to materials, you know, it's less paint. You use less paint. And so what happens is that you save money. You save a lot of money when you don't have to, you know, continue buying paint to apply to whatever you're spray painting. EcoBiz. Now that's a statewide green business program. And so we go with landscapers, restaurants, and auto body shops, auto repair shops. We go in there, we certify them as green. And some of the benefits that if they're certified, some of the benefits they receive is money savings, environmental protection, a better relationship with the regulatory partners, and a lot of promotion by the state and by the local authorities that your program or your shop is green. And so there is over time data that shows that whoever is certified as green does increase the bottom line, right? You get more customers and more savings through that program. And then the fourth one is pollution prevention, zero waste training. So a few years ago, we received some funding from the Washington State Department of Ecology to combine pollution prevention training with zero waste training. And so zero waste training is basically a practice that focuses on reducing solid waste. Pollution prevention is more focused on hazardous waste. So it made a lot of sense for us to just combine both methodologies and provide training to at least 5 tribes in the state of Washington. And, you know, TSWAN was very critical and important for us getting that funding. And we worked with Cindy Spirey in the Snoqualmie tribe to at least introduce the training. But these type of trainings take more than a year to 2 years to be effective, because it requires us to build a integrated waste management plan, and then over time start implementing the steps that is required to reduce solid waste, hazardous waste, and so on. So yeah, so and other things that we offer are rapid response, so that if you have any environmental issue, we can give up to 10 hours of research for you. Okay, and that's about it. So you have any questions, just let me know. I'll be around. And with that, I'll hand over the mic.
Hey, I understand we've had some questions online, and I just wanted to address that. Once we get through sort of this quick introduction of the lands programs, we're going to go to a table discussion, and in that table discussion, we're going to talk about what we heard that's, that we were like, oh, we perked up, we thought that was interesting, but also, where are we in this work? Are there places where we want to explore more, but sort of we'll have a discussion, and then we'll come back and we'll have some Q&A. So there will be an opportunity for questions and answers for all our panelists. I don't want you to be stressed out about that, but we did want to sort of introduce the concepts as we went through. And I am going to help us move on to the Brownfields program. Some of you, actually many of you, may be aware of Brownfields. How many of you work with our Brownfields folks? Awesome. So we're going to hear from them and a couple of technical assistance providers who are also part of the Brownfields discussion. So the next 3 panelists are all connected, and you can.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you so much for inviting me here. This is such an amazing conference. I'm the land revitalization coordinator. My name's Margaret Olson. I'm based in the Portland, Oregon operations office. So EPA doesn't let me out of Oregon too much. So it's so great when you all come here because I'm allowed to go. So I have been working in the Brownfield program, some part-time, but now I'm full-time for the last 15 years. And I got to say, the last 3 years and the next 2 years are the most exciting time in the program, because with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we were given 1.5 billion in funding to do assessment and cleanup of brownfield sites over that 5-year period of the infrastructure law. So if you have any brownfield sites that you want to get worked on, now is the time to do it. Because after these next 2 years of the infrastructure law, we're going to go back to normal funding, which is still good. And we still get a lot of great things done. But this is the time to get those really super amazing projects done. So the types of funding we have, and this is going to stay the same under regular appropriations as well as infrastructure law. Most of the funding is given out through grants. There's both non-competitive grants, which are tribal response programs, which I know a lot of you folks have. And there's competitive grants, which go to nonprofits, tribes, states, local governments to do assessment and cleanup of brownfield sites. But those go out to the whole nation and you compete and you have to write the whole proposal. And then we also have other types of programs that are more assistance-based. And I'll talk a little bit about those too. But first I'll go into the tribal response program. I work with the most amazing grantee ever, Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. They're in Oregon, but I think a lot of the work they do could correlate with what you all do in Alaska. So they've had a really successful brownfield program for about 12 years. And they started out overseeing a site that was of historical significance to the tribe. It's called Coos Head, and the Navy had decimated the site and contaminated it. So they were using their tribal response program for the first few years to do the oversight of the Navy cleaning up this site. And now they have the site, and that's wonderful. And they've kept the tribal response program. They've pretty much cleaned up the site. They're having some reopeners with PFAS. Now they actually had gotten a cleanup completion on it, but going to have to go back and do some more work with PFAS because there was firefighting going on at the site. They've also done other assessment and cleanup of other brownfield sites, and they're also using their tribal response program to develop their own environmental lab and get this lab accredited so that other tribes could potentially use their lab to do testing with EPA brownfield projects in the future too. So, but one great thing about CLUSI is what we call them, Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw. They also they were given back 15,000 acres through the Western Oregon Tribal Fairness Act a couple of years ago. And they were able to get some extra infrastructure funding through their TRP. They got $1.2 million to assess those 15,000 acres that were given back to them. The acres went right into trust, which was an unusual process, but that's because this was a direct act. But they still want to get phase 1s and phase 2 assessments to know exactly what is on those acres and to know if there's anything they should be concerned about. So that was a really great boost of funding from the infrastructure law that they could add to their TRP to specifically do this work. We also have the competitive grants, which, as I mentioned, they can go out to pretty much the whole nation of eligible applicants. But Grand Ronde, our host tribe, got a competitive grant. You may have seen the beautiful picture that Kathleen George put up yesterday of the Tumwater Village. That was taken over and taken from the tribes that used it historically, and a paper mill was built on that, which just closed about 12 years ago. So Grand Ronde got an $800,000 multi-purpose grant to assess and clean up that site. And of course, this site is going to cost a whole lot more than $800,000, but it's good seed money for doing that work. So that's with our competitive grant program. Then we have non-competitive technical assistance programs that aren't grants. We're starting one through our land revitalization program with the Tlingit and Haida tribe. And this is going to kind of meld in with their Swiffer grant, but we're going to be designing the recycling center on a brownfield site for the tribe so that they can come up with the best use of, it's called the Thane site in Juneau, to build this recycling center that's going to take the waste that they're collecting with their Swiffer grant. So it's neat when things can come to play like that. I'm also doing a technical assistance project with the Chehalis tribe, and I just want to bring this one up because a lot of times people think of the brownfield program and the land revitalization and redevelopment we do as like building something, a shopping center or a school, or it doesn't have to be. So the one I'm doing with the Chehalis tribe is going to be a wildlife migration corridor. There was 120 acres that is along I-5, and it was donated to a nonprofit called the Veterans Ecological Trades Collective. But as this nonprofit got into the site and realized how much contamination there was, they've been kind of scared. So they've been working with the tribe to turn this land over to the tribe. And it's a natural corridor, and the tribe does a lot of habitat restoration. So it's going to make a lot of sense for the nonprofit that was overwhelmed with this contaminated site to turn it over to the tribe. But EPA is going to, we came in with technical assistance to kind of give an overview of what needs to be done and come up with a plan for doing this in chunks. And then we're working with Washington Department of Ecology, EPA's program, and Washington Department of Commerce to actually get all the assessment done for the Chehalis tribe before they take on this property. So that's something we can do through land revitalization. We also have another program called the Targeted Brownfield Assessment Program. And that's where if you don't have the capacity to manage a grant or just the desire to manage a grant, you just have a single site, EPA can come in with our contractor and we can do the phase 1 or phase 2 assessment work on the site. So that's a really great one if you just have a single site that you want to get looked at. And the woman who runs that program is actually out of our Anchorage office. Her name's Molly Vaughn. And I've got some one-page fact sheets with kind of a summary of the funding we have. And I'm not going to pass those out because they're also going to be on the app. But if you want one of those, come see me. I've got them in this folder. But most importantly, if you get nothing else out, if you've got a brownfield site, come and talk to us. We've got our 2 experts here too are going to share more about the brownfield program. But we're all happy to talk about this. And, you know, it's hard to figure out what is the best fit for funding, assessment, cleanup, and redevelopment of a site. But we can kind of help you walk through that. And sometimes it's not one funding source, it's multiple, like what we're doing with the site for the Chehalis. We're going to use 3 sources of funding to get the assessment done. So we're always happy to talk to you about what's going to work best for your needs. And now I will pass it on to one of our wonderful technical assistance providers, Joy Britt with Center for Creative Land Recycling.
Thank you. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. Good morning. So as Margaret mentioned, my name is Joy Britt. I work for the Center for Creative Land Recycling. We also go by the name See Clear, like you're seeing clearly. Helps you remember. What we do is we champion the beneficial reuse of underutilized and contaminated properties or potentially contaminated properties, which are known as brownfields. If you have a site in your community and you don't know if it's contaminated, but you have an idea that, hey, maybe those drums are filled with something, that could be a brownfield site. And so we always want to add potentially contaminated properties to that definition because we, you, us, we all deserve clean, healthy, and safe neighborhoods to live, work, and play in. So CClear provides free of cost brownfield reuse technical assistance for EPA Region 9, which includes Arizona, California, Hawaii, Nevada, the Pacific Islands, and 148 tribal nations. And of course, EPA Region 10, inclusive of Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and 271 tribal nations. Our work promotes public health, revitalizes communities, and builds resiliency. Some real-world examples from Alaska include CClear's work with Yukon River Intertribal Watershed Council and OTNA Inc. of which both entities received the EPA Community-Wide Assessment Grant. Those were the competitive grants that Margaret was talking about. For Ahtna, CCLR helped review their Brownfields Community-Wide Assessment Grant application. We offered guidance on how to maximize proposal points, which really helped them receive the award. For Yukon River, CCLR provided assistance with the grant management after they received that competitive award. We helped them with grant management, acres training, with applying for the DEC, Brownfields Assessment and Cleanup Service. Now this is called a DBAC, which is only accessible by Alaska tribes and organizations. So that's through DEC. We provide assistance with review of underground storage tank investigations report, which helps better coordinate their scope of work and evaluate potential funding sources, as well as aiding with an extension for assessment grant request for extension. There is no question too big or too small that CCLR won't be able to help you with. So if you just think anything brownfields, give me a call. You can check out our brochure. We have a slew of individuals with a lot of different expertise in procurement, in planning. We have environmental scientists that can really help dig into those reports and help explain to people like me that I'm like, what does that mean? So we have people that can really dig into that for you. We can give you tools and connections to plan a redevelopment roadmap, thus championing the pathway for success. We offer current information and advice on regulations, funding, cleanup, and community engagement to meet your milestones. We also share common documents such as RFPs and marketing sheets to introduce to you and your peers, introduce you to industry experts and developers to learn from and meet your project needs. So as your Region 10 technical assistance to Brownfields provider, we're here for any questions you have, like I mentioned. So let's help you repurpose your community's abandoned, vacant, or underutilized properties for beneficial reuse. And I have a lot of handouts for you, so I can pass those up. I'll hand it over to Bailey.
All righty. Thanks, Joy. My name is Bailey Richards. I manage the Contaminated Sites program at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium in Anchorage, or ANTHC for short. In a nutshell, our program exists to help tribes and tribal entities like consortia or Alaska Native corporations to address contaminated sites that are affecting their people and their communities. We work with a few different types of contaminated sites. Brownfields is a really big focus of our program. Margaret was mentioning the 120-day tribal response program. We do have a grant, one of those programs for our program. But beyond that, we also offer mentorship to the other 23 tribal response programs throughout Alaska. We are also a technical assistance to brownfields provider through the tribe-specific arm of that program. So CCLR, Joy's organization, is serving organizations all over Regions 9 and 10, tribe or non-tribal. We are the designated tribal-specific technical assistance hub for Alaska tribes, but we do work closely with CCLR as well. We also work on a couple other types of contaminated sites outside of brownfields. One of those is properties that were conveyed to Alaska Native corporations, contaminated through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. We call those ANCSA contaminated lands for short. Ken and Mari, who are floating above me on the screen, will be talking about that in a few minutes. But we facilitate the ANCSA Contaminated Lands Partnership Group, which is a working group that you all are welcome to attend. And we also offer technical assistance to any entities who are interested in accessing that funding program for those ANCSA properties. And in addition to those two types, we also will help identify whether a contaminated site in your community might be a good fit for the Formerly Used Defense Sites program or NALEMP. Regardless of the site or what type it is or its history, we can help you determine which direction to send it in. So we use the term technical assistance a lot when we're talking about our services, but what does that actually mean? It's pretty broad. Basically, we can help you identify resources or paths forward for your sites at any stage of the contaminated site life cycle. So if you're just at the beginning stages of trying to identify what sites might be a concern in your community, we can help you with that. We can do some site research, do some history of potential spills in your community. We can even go out to your community and do a walkthrough of your community with you to look for properties that might be good to dig into a little bit. If you're interested in getting a site assessment done, you've identified a site that you're concerned about, you want to know more about it, we can help you apply for assessment resources, some of the resources that Margaret and Joy were talking about. We can also help with those applications. And we can also help read through the reports that come out of that. A lot of the assessment reports can feel really technical to read. So if you're not sure, what does this actually mean for me and my community, we can help you kind of decode that. In terms of site cleanup, the magical stage that we all want to get to, we can help you look at the pros and cons of various cleanup options. Usually those are identified through the assessment that you do on the site. We can also help you with the procurement process to get a contractor to do the cleanup work. And once you get that contractor and start your project, we can help with project and contract management if that's something that you need support with. And then lastly, I shouldn't say lastly, we have a lot of different services, but in terms of the site life cycle, especially with brownfields, site reuse planning is a big part of that. Joy and Margaret mentioned this. With brownfield sites, you're really looking at not just cleaning up a site, but taking it to the next step into redevelopment to a higher, more useful purpose for what your community needs. So if you are trying to identify what reuses might be good for your community, we can help you have those conversations. We did this last summer in the village of Gullivan in the Bering Straits region. We had a team travel out to the community in partnership with their IGAP program and host a community conversation about their infrastructure needs, their cultural needs, their relocation plans over the next few years. And based on that conversation, identified a few top reuse plans for contaminated sites in Gullivan that they were really interested in pursuing. From there, we put together a nice report that broke down what we heard, and then we actually created some images using photos we took in the community in Photoshop of what those reuse plans would actually look like in their community. So now they have that report to give to funders to reference for future conversations. Regardless of what stage you're at with contaminated sites in your community, there isn't a wrong time to reach out to us. We try to be really accessible and meet you where you're at. We will travel out to your community if you would like. We can do trainings, community education, site visits. But if for some reason we can't help you with what you need, we'll find somebody who can. We have a really large network of partners like SeaClear, like EPA, the state, various universities with contaminated site programs and resources that we can connect you with. We're happy to make those connections. And just to close out, we also, ANTHC is a big organization. We have a lot of connections. And so our program really tries to use that to advocate for, systemic changes that will make it easier for all of you to do contaminated site work. We want to break down any barriers that you have, like funding or logistics, to make this work a reality for you. And we want to make sure that you feel heard and have access to all the resources out there. So one of the things that we've been working on, is, as some of you might know, Alaska tribes actually aren't currently eligible for EPA's competitive brownfield grants. Corporations are, and consortium nonprofits are, but tribes are not. And that's a shame because that's a huge funding source that we're missing out on in Alaska, one of the only designated funding sources for brownfields assessments and cleanups. So our program pulled in ANTHC's legal and intergovernmental affairs teams, and we've, over the last year, been working with Senator Sullivan's office to actually submit an amendment to the law that would strike that Alaska Native exclusion from those resources. So that amendment did pass through committee earlier this year, and it's looking really good to go through the full congressional vote soon. So fingers crossed. But my point there is, even if you don't have a site that you're ready to pursue right now, please feel free to reach out to us if you just have thoughts or asks or recommendations for ways to make this work easier for you. We're not shy about passing that feedback up to our congressional delegation or our partners at EPA or the state. So we're happy to be a resource however you all need. I will close there and hand it to Scott, but I look forward to connecting with anyone who's interested.
We're actually going to go to the ANCSA folks on the screen. You're good. I just really want to thank THC for being such an amazing partner in this work. Other than the tribal coordinators, they are like your one-stop shop in Alaska for a lot of these programs. So if you have questions and you just don't know where to start, Bailey is an amazing place to start. So just to throw that out there, we've been giving you a lot of information today. So next we're going to hear from our ANCSA contaminated lands folks. And just a quick time check. Sorry, guys. We're wanting to have some robust discussion and some question and answer time. And so in order to facilitate that, we want to rush through our last couple of quick presentations. So quick as you can. Thanks.
All right, can you hear us all right?
Yeah.
All right, great. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I wish we could be there in person with you, but we're in Anchorage today. So I'm Ken Andrashko with the EPA Region 10 ANCSA Contaminated Sites Program. And
hey, everyone, I'm Mari Lowinger. I'm also with the Contaminated Sites Program. It's a real bummer that we're not with you today, but I hope you guys are having a great conference. It sounds like such a great opportunity, and I wish I could see your faces. So I'm picturing the room in my imagination.
Yeah, we hear we're right above you there. So, so kind of breaking it down, what our program's all about, give you a little background. So the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which was enacted over 50 years ago, back in 1971, to settle the Aboriginal claims to lands in Alaska that included the conveyance of over 46 million acres of land to the Alaska Native Regional and Village corporations. So, and part of this conveyance process, it did not include the screening of the sites for contamination. And therefore, it was discovered years later that a lot of the lands contained harmful contaminants, such as asbestos, lead, PCBs, drums, tanks, fuel releases, and all sorts of other hazardous and toxic waste. So that really created an environmental injustice as part of that transfer. So the contaminants on these lands also threaten the Alaska Native subsistence way of life and negatively affect their health. The conveyed lands also hold an important cultural and ecological and economical historic significance to the tribes and corporations. So over 1,000 sites have been identified by BLM over the years as being contaminated at this time of conveyance. In a little bit, we'll talk about like our GIS tool that EPA has put together in association with all the different other federal entities to kind of help monitor and track those different sites. So in an effort to accelerate the cleanup of these contaminated lands that were conveyed to Alaska Native corporations, Congress last year appropriated $20 million in funding, and that's what kicked off this program. And then again, just about a month and a half ago, Congress appropriated another $20 million in FY24, so fiscal year 24, to continue addressing these lands. And we've understand that, the money should be continuing, but right now we have $40 million to address these sites. So first 3 awards happened last year to Ukpiavik Village Corporation, Tyonek Village Corporation, and Onalaska Village Corporation. And then in addition to that $40 million, Congress also appropriated $7.5 million in congressional directed spending projects in FY23 last year to help with technical assistance and site verification and work. So that funding went to Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. You heard Bailey talk about some of the programs. So funding also went to ANTHC, and also funding is going to the Alaska Native Village Corporation Association for support as well into the program. So again, we're sitting on well over $30 million in grant and cooperative agreement money still available. So I really encourage you to give us a call, and I'm going to let Mari talk about some of those opportunities here. So I'll turn the floor over to her.
Thanks, Ken. So as you see up on the slide, I'm assuming everyone can see the slide that we're seeing. There's a link there and a QR code. Similarly, if you were to just type into the Google chat, EPA Region 10 ANCSA, it's going to bring up our website. I'm pointing you guys to that website for a couple reasons. The first is that we have a program guidance up there, which outlines pretty much every detail you'd want to know about the grant program specifically. So if it's something you're thinking about, or if you have contaminated sites that you think may be legacy ANCSA sites, that website's a really good place to start. The grant program is aimed at providing funding for assessing and cleaning up these legacy contaminated sites that were conveyed through ANCSA. And we do that through non-competitive, cooperative agreements. The program is on a rolling basis, so that's really nice, during grant season when you're struggling to get your TRP proposal in or your IGAP proposal in. We don't have those specific deadlines, and we really want to work with you holistically, similar to what Bailey shared, to find out what your needs are, what the site-specific issues are, and work with you on developing a good proposal. So you can request up to $3 million per project for up to a 5-year project period. And you can actually submit for multiple requests. So if you have multiple ANCSA sites in your community, you can either bundle them into one proposal or multiple proposals. And we acknowledge that this isn't a lot of money given the number of sites that we have across the state and the amount of funding that it would require to really get to clean up complete status, but it is a start. So we're hoping to keep building this effort. Tribes in Alaska are eligible, as well as tribal consortia, native corporations, and other nonprofit organizations. So there's a bunch of eligibility opportunities for different organizations. If you are thinking about applying, I do encourage you, because the lands are typically owned by corporations, to figure out, which entity wants to apply and what that role is going to look like. We really want collaborations here and buy-in from landowners and other community collaborators. So important things to know in terms of eligibility.
You guys just froze for a second. I don't know if you can hear us. Sorry, I want to get to discussion and questions and answers. And the only way we're going to do that is if we continue on. We heard from T-Swan, who's a great resource for that tribal solid waste work. And we'd heard from Ed Gonzalez from PPRC and the pollution prevention program. So looking upstream, how can we prevent that pollution from getting into our communities? Then we moved on to brownfields, and we talked about some site cleanup and some of that work. And then we've moved on to ANCSA contaminated lands and that potential cleanup work. And we all kind of operate under the GAP program. Most of us receive GAP funds, and we, on some level, do some sort of solid waste within Alaska. That's a thing that happens. Something that we really wanted to highlight here while we had the opportunity is this funding source under the EJ program, and particularly the community change grants. We're going to have one more round of community change grants this year. And so what I asked Scott to really talk about today and focus in on is the opportunities under community change grants that pick up where some of our programs leave off. So under brownfields, we don't have the competitive funding necessarily in Alaska. And for a lot of our communities, how many of us have like a burnt out building that's just kind of derelict in there, and you don't have a way to like clean it up in our community, or have something that's like eroded partially into a river and you can't find funding sources to get that building torn down the rest of the way? And GAP prohibits this activity around deconstruction and demolition. So the community change grant is a great opportunity to kind of pick up where we leave off from those programs. So Scott's going to talk really quickly about that, and then we're going to get to Q&A.
Hi, everybody. Scott Schleif. This is super weird to have a microphone and not be singing karaoke, so bear with me. As she said, I'm here to talk about our community change grants. One thing I want to point out, for those of you who've been following the environmental justice space, you'll know that there has been unprecedented levels of investment in environmental justice from EPA over the last couple of years. Our Region 10 environmental justice program has grown from 1 person to 15 in the last 2 years. Our grants programs went from 35 million up to several $billion. We have unprecedented levels of funding. Specific to that is the Community Change Grants Program. That is a $2 billion with a B program that is meant to go to communities to address climate crisis, environmental justice issues. And so kind of a highlight of the program is that it's 1.96 billion towards track 1, which is your climate strategies and pollution reduction programs. Another $40 million is actually going towards community development and developing that capacity building within your communities. And we can talk about that more in detail if you want. But to pick up where the other programs left off, I wanted to highlight a couple of the different activities that are allowed within our program. So we anticipate these awards to be $10 to $20 million projects. So we're talking about big funding. And specific to that, in line with the brownfields and the ENCSA contaminated lands, we actually have a way to do brownfield redevelopment programs. So if you have those brownfields and they've been cleared and they've been cleaned up, and you want to do something else with that land, we're actually providing money that can be used for the redevelopment of those lands into something more beneficial for your community. That is not something that we've ever been able to see or do before. Another thing that we're able to do specific to Alaska is actually ENCSA contaminated lands cleanup. So they talked about how they're trying to get that passed so that they can start doing that cleanup of those lands. We actually already have a way to do that. You can do your initial site assessment and planning. You can do your sampling and initial cleanups under our Community Change Grants program. If you just Google EPA Community Change Grants, it'll bring you right to the notice of funding opportunity. When you go and you look at that notice of funding opportunity, I urge you to look at appendixes C and D. You're going to see a lot of examples of different sort of projects that fit within the scope of our grants program to help kind of inspire you and help you think more about how could I utilize those funds in my community. I also want to highlight that we have carve-outs specifically for tribes and Alaska Native villages. So there's $150 million of that $2 billion that is set aside for Alaska. And then $300 million for the lower 48 and Hawaii. And those are carve-out specifically for it. It doesn't mean you can't access the other funds as well, but those are specifically set aside to help out the tribal communities and Alaska Native villages. So highly encourage you to go look at that. We have an ongoing open enrollment. So they're reviewing those projects right now. They're going to continue to review them periodically throughout the rest of the year. The deadline for applications is November 21st. There are 3 years. You have then 3 years to use those project funds. You may find that this works well with some other programs and fills in the gaps of things that you're doing with GAP or some of these other programs that were talked about today. This could fill in that missing piece and really move your project to the next level and provide that drastic change within that community. What was the other thing I wanted to say? That's kind of it. I do have handouts and pamphlets. There's out on the desk out there. Feel free to come talk to me. Again, my name is Scott Schleif. For those of you who are from Alaska, you may recognize the name Alessandro Molina, who is our EJ point of contact for the state of Alaska. He's been to a lot of events up there. He is the main point of contact for this Community Change Grants program, and his information is on the page as well. But I'm happy to field any questions on it.
Thank you. I appreciate all of our panelists today, and I understand we gave them a really tough assignment. We said 3 to 5 minutes talking about these programs so that we could get to some discussion. And that's really difficult to do. So as we just demonstrated. So with our remaining time, I wanted to pose a question for everybody to think about here. And that is, where are you currently within this work? And what have you heard today that might change your trajectory or might be something that you're thinking about now that you weren't thinking about before you came to the session? I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds to think about that. And we're going to open it up for questions. And I'm actually going to start with some folks online because there were some folks really early on who had some questions. The other thing I'm going to say is that a lot of our folks are going to be available tomorrow for a little bit of we're calling it a speed dating event. And so you'll be able to find people and ask those one-on-one questions. So anybody who's here in person, you'll be able to track them down. And then for the folks who are online, you will be able to connect with our virtual presenters and virtual folks. If folks are not available tomorrow, and I understand our eggs and contaminated lands folks are not available tomorrow for that event, you can reach out to them directly. Their contact information is both on their website, it's on the screen, and it's also available on a one-pager that is attached in the Whova app. And so for all of these folks, the materials that they are passing out, we have a copy of that on the Whova app that's connected with the session. So you'll be able to go back and reference that to find people's contact information if you don't connect with them while you're at the event here. This was really meant to get you to start thinking. So I'm gonna ask our wonderful tech folks if we have some questions online. So in the room, do we have some questions? Do we have some thoughts? Ideas? Catherine Brown's got her hand up.
My idea is a quick stretch because we heard so much incredible information. It could be overloading. So if we were going to transition into talking, getting up and moving might help.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you need to wiggle, I encourage wiggling. If you need to just stand up and stretch. I know we gave you a ton of information this morning. And again, our intent was to be part of this plotting your course journey that we're on today, right? So we're thinking about what we heard from folks and we're getting that, we're gonna think about how does that fit within our needs of our communities? How does this potentially, change our course for what we're going to be doing moving forward? Our hope is that this time here will give you some things to talk about within your communities, within the folks who are here today. I will say that there are folks in this room who have done a lot of this work. There are folks online who have done a lot of this work, and we want to encourage you to reach out and to find community. Do we have any questions that have come up online? Not seeing any. So I'm going to pick on some folks. Oh, we've got one.
This is Twin Hills. I'm kind of wondering, do you continually update the ANGSCA contaminated sites on the webpage?
Yes, that was one thing that they did not get a chance to go over, but as we get more information and as we learn about these sites, some of these sites have not been identified yet. And so the maps and the information are being updated as soon as we get the assessment and the information on those new sites as they crop up. We have a handful that we already knew about. They're already on the map, but that map gets updated as we go through projects.
Can we add to that question, Christy? Do you have a second?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that it's not that the map just gets updated. We really rely on all of you to provide those updates. So we have a lot of sites, and there's so many more sites that aren't on that inventory. So on that slide that was up on screen with the little cutout showing the big GIS map. So we have what's called the common operating picture, also known as the inventory of all the sites. But a lot of those sites were inherited from previous databases. There's a feature on that GIS site or database, however we want to call it, the inventory, where you can submit a new site. So if you look at that inventory and you see that there aren't sites, it's really important that you guys submit a new site using that feature there. And if it seems a little confusing to navigate it, please contact one of us and we can help you with that. And you know, as we mentioned, the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC, is a key partner, and they can also help, as well as ANTHC, with that new feature. So it's really important. There's way more sites than what's up there, but we really need all of you when you've got concerns about sites in your community to figure out if it is an ANCSA site and get that uploaded. Ken, did you have anything?
So yeah, if you want to give us a call or give me a call, and we can walk you right through that whole common operating picture, kind of do a demonstration for you, kind of show you how to submit those new sites, kind of go over your sites in your community as well, and all the key features are always available to walk you through those kind of things too.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do we have any other questions? Oh, that one.
Good morning. Hi, Mari. I have a question. Do you have applications that came in? And the second part of the question is, how are you reaching out to the corporations so that they're aware of it? Or is the EPA reaching out? Are you relying on the IGAP staff and tribes to share that information?
Thanks, Gina. So two questions there. This is part of our outreach effort. Just we're doing a lot of mixed outreach through different venues. We're not just relying on the IGAP network. I'll let Ken talk a little bit more about the outreach to the corporations, but we do have a couple of proposals in hand that we're working through now. There were some proposals that came in a year ago when the program first started, where we were focused on what we call shovel-ready projects. Now that we're beyond that phase, we do have a couple more in that we're actively working through, and we anticipate others coming in. It is a bit of a slow process because the eligibility review, even though it's a non-competitive program, we still have to figure out like the site history and the history of conveyance and contamination. So it can take some time. So even though we're really dedicated and passionate to getting awards out and getting the word out, it can be a slow process actually getting proposals in and to the final award. But yes, we do have some active ones. And Ken, do you want to answer her?
Sure, on the outreach. So yeah, we've been going to a lot of forums like this, AFE, Alaska Forum on the Environment, ATCAM, and like recently, just last week, we were at the ANVCA's and ATAA's symposium here in Anchorage. So we've been reaching out to all the corporations, the regional corporations, talking to them. We've talked to the Regional Corporations Managers Association, and done several presentations with all the different land manager representatives from each of the 12 regional corporations as well. So, and anytime we can set up like smaller presentations or individual ones with either the regional or the village corporations. We've been doing that as well. So just trying to get the word out as fast and as much as possible.
And if you have ideas for us, please let us know. We're constantly evolving and developing our outreach planning effort. And our team is growing. So there's, we're trying to be measured about it as well and try to hit the right audiences. And because this is, really a new program, it's been around about a year and a few months. So this is part of that momentum.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have any questions online before we wrap? No, okay. Thank you all for being here today. Before I completely wrap up, I wanted to point out that within your workbook of plotting your course, there's a question on worksheet number 4 that says, list 3 technical assistance providers and their contact information. We heard from a slew of technical assistance providers today. We heard from our TSWAN partners, we heard from PPRC, we heard from ANTHC, we heard from Centers for Creative Land Reuse, Joy Britt. Those are all folks that are here. And, if you want to follow up, if you have questions for those folks, make sure you jot down their names from our session this morning. Coming up next in this room, we are going to be moving on to clean water and energy independence in Alaska. So if you're Alaska centered, you want to probably stay in this room. And we're going to do in Kalapuya land protection programs for tribes with reservations. So those folks who helped to present in this session, who are Universal, we're going to move over next door. And I just really wanted to point out that on the Whova app, there is contact information. The one-pagers that all of us referenced are there. So when you get home, you can go back to that site to find the information. And the contact information for Mari and Ken is there. I would encourage you, if you have questions about things that they were talking about, please reach out. They're very much in that mode of like, come talk to us. We want to hear from you. And so you all, you all know, I just wanted you to be aware that they're there. And for the folks who are here in person tomorrow morning, we're going to have a session where you can reach out directly to some of the folks that you heard from today. So this is not your last opportunity to talk to them. They will be here. And you can also just reach out to them using their contact information to set up follow-up meetings as well. We really wanted this whole conference to be about making those connections, hearing from folks, and then getting that follow-up. So that's part of our plotting our course. Thank you so much.